Hi, I'm Alex Howards, and welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy, real life therapy sessions as they happen. In this week's episode, we're going to be exploring how self-care and self-love really are the foundation to everything else in our lives falling into place. Stay tuned till the end for my top tip on how to keep things on track and avoid falling into old patterns when things are going well. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon to be notified as new episodes are released, and follow my other social channels for daily inspiration and support. In this week's episode, we catch up with Katie, who's been going through some major life changes with children leaving home and the breakdown of her marriage. Last time, Katie had encountered a tricky situation with her sister, but used her tools to step back from the conflicts and prioritize self-love and self-care, building an important foundation for managing other relationships in her life.
Katie, it's lovely to see you in person. It feels like it has been a bit of a lifetime. I think it has been about 6 months since we last sat here together. Obviously, we've been talking on Zoom, but
Yep.
How are you doing?
I'm really, at the moment, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm very good. I've had, as you know, a couple of dips, quite dramatic. Well, one quite dramatic dip, and then a couple of sort of just road humps. But
Yeah.
I'm feeling at the moment today. I'm feeling really, really good.
And I think, as we've talked about, you've done really well navigating through those bumps. And I think it feels to me that obviously there's still lots of work to do, but it's a sign of those foundations being established. And well done to you. I know when we spoke the session before last on Zoom, you were particularly in a struggling place, and you really did the work. And I'm really pleased to see that things have been moving from there. I've been really curious. You started your new job, I think it was a week ago yesterday.
2 weeks ago yesterday.
So,
So this is my third week in that job.
So how has it been so far?
Amazing. I mean, it's really hugely busy, and I keep having to sort of pinch myself to think that I've managed to get that job and the position, but it's right up my street. I do still have those thoughts, that I'm not good enough and they made a mistake and they'll find out that I'm really shit. And
despite the fact that you won the industry award last year.
Well, I haven't won it yet. We were shortlisted, but
you won it in my mind.
So I do still have those thoughts, and I do still get quite overwhelmed sometimes when there's a lot coming at me, and then I've noticed, which is a new thing, I've noticed that then I start really beating up on myself rather than I go in rather than out, rather than saying, right, I've got this, I've got too much, how can I reduce this workload? I start saying, oh, you're crap, this is, you should be able to cope with this, you should be able to do this, you should be able to manage this better.
It's good that you see that.
I've never noticed it before. And also, Simon, my husband, moved back in.
That's quite big news, Casey. So maybe we need to back up a little bit.
I told you that. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I knew that it was on the cards that there was some reconciliation that was happening.
Yeah.
But that's quite a big thing to just sort of drop gently in the session.
I didn't know whether I'd mentioned that in the last session, but I don't do things slowly normally. So that was our reconciliation was kind of a slow burner. And then what happened was, after I had the big sort of fallout with my sister, and I was so wounded by that, but I felt that did heal a lot of pain that I had within me, a lot of events from the past. I really processed it. My sister has been quite a tricky character all my life, since I was little. And we're very different. And I feel she's been quite judgmental of me, whether she understands this or not, and whether it's subconscious or conscious, that it's convenient for her if I'm the problem.
Yeah, your scapegoat is.
Yeah. And when I'm not the problem, and I believe this because it's happened on several occasions. She sort of almost goes out of her way to try and make me the problem again.
Yes.
Which is what's happened with this birthday thing. And I have always felt in the past I haven't had a voice, and that the narrative has then just been what she says it is, and that has felt very unfair and unjust, and it's really been very, very painful. And I've had that a lot over my life, and I've done some work with that over the last couple of weeks in the therapy that I've been having with Simon, which is the
couples work,
that we've been doing. And he, after that happened, and when I was so desperately hurt, and the pain for me is so intense when I feel like that, I just can't function. And he, out of everybody, he was so supportive, and there was almost a shift in, because over the years of our marriage, we've been together for 24, 25 years, and he's never really fully got the dynamics of my family.
Yes.
Because I don't think he can really believe that a family can conduct itself in the way that my family has conducted itself over the years.
And what happened that helped him see it differently? Was it the therapist helping mirror it back in some way, or
because
being encouraged to listen to you more?
That definitely, and also because he's. I mean, I've told him many times, but it was the penny drop moment. You can hear something a dozen times and not. Yeah. Not
you can hear it without hearing it.
Hearing it, but then one day you just hear it. And I think what happened was that when I went sort of deep and worked out why I was so I know that my reactions sometimes are very out of proportion to what's happened. So I understood in this particular case that it was a lot of unhealed pain that was coming up.
Because that's often because you're not reacting just to that one event. You're
totally
reacting to all the other events that haven't been processed and dealt with.
And so I was able to process all those events by understanding that at the root of it was fear, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being loved. And that, for me, was a penny drop moment, but also for Simon, because he recognised that you can't really judge somebody if they're frightened, I think.
It sounds like that when you've been in that place, his response has been to pull back emotionally or to judge or to reject, which then makes you feel even more afraid and even more abandoned. And it sounds like what happened here is actually he was able to come closer and provide some support, which is what you've ultimately always needed. Of course, we've talked about you being there for you, and you've been doing a really good job of evolving that. But to have him be there for you, I think is very powerful.
I think me being there for me is probably fundamentally, I mean, the work that we've done together has been so powerful in so much as I have got a greater respect for myself now.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. And I have got the tools to, the self-love meditations, the compassion meditations, all that I can, and that visualizing that little girl that was so frightened and bewildered, and being able to give myself that love, or give that little girl the love, is hugely powerful for me, and I use it all the time. I mean, that's just it's the bedrock of my life now. And when I do start to feel those emotions, sort of, I mean, but with what happened with my sister, it was overwhelming. I mean, I couldn't do anything about that.
Yeah,
but having said that, I did react differently. So I chose not to engage with her. I did cry a lot, and I did feel intense pain, but I also chose not to send her a text and
to not try to fix it afterwards. We talked last time about putting in place a boundary that allowed you to go, that behaviour is just not okay, and it's actually reasonable that I'm feeling all of these things.
But I had a fear. I think the biggest fear was not her behaviour or how it made me feel. The biggest fear was that narrative would be adopted by everybody else, which is what's happened in the past. And it wasn't. And I happened to be at my parents' house when it all happened.
Yes.
So I had this conversation with my mum, and I said, and I was honest. I said that my fear, I'm in fear. I'm afraid that this narrative that I have ruined my sister's birthday is going to become the narrative forevermore. And
the next story, the next chapter in a historical story of it's always Katie's fault, which is a story, not actually
Yeah.
the truth.
And my mum said to me, and before she would never commit. My mum, she would admit it herself. She's run with the hare and the hounds a lot, and I can see now that that's not necessarily been a manipulative way of behaving. It's almost been her own fear at not wanting to. I can see. I can
and
see.
You know what it's like as a parent as well,
Yeah.
right? You end up in impossible positions where you need to back truth,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to reject one of your children.
Although, having said that, as a parent, I do call out bad behaviour.
But it's tricky.
But it is tricky. But I do call it out, and I do, but I do understand that there are two sides to every story, and I do understand that my sister's not in a great place, although she wouldn't admit that. So it's very hard to
and hurt people,
and hurt people, and that's what I say to my mum all the time. But she did give me a commitment. She said, "I promise you that I will not. I know what's happened, and I will not." And that's when that conversation about, and I'm really sorry about some of the things that I've said and done in the past that have caused you pain, and then I just melt at that. I just think, well.
Because that's what you long for.
Yeah.
That's what in your heart you need from your mum, you need to hear. But also I want to come back to what's happened with Simon, because it sounds like that's also, he's been able to speak to that place in you.
Yeah.
So just catch me up on the narrative. So you've been doing the couples work. It sounds like that's been going well, and you've both shown up to that. So the practitioner's done a great job. But just sort of run me through how, because I think when we first started working together, you were very much in the place of I'm finished, I'm leaving, it's over. And then you sort of said to me a few times over the last sort of 7-8 months, maybe the door's open, I'm not sure, I'm confused.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly, so what happened?
Well, I don't think it definitely did that, but that week I was in a lot of pain, and I was trying to grapple, and then I got the job offer, and then there was a lot of uncertainty. During our therapy together, I've recognised that it's not just him who's the issue, it's me as well, and it's a lot of my.
Funny that.
I know. Of my.
It's almost never the case that it's just one side, right?
Always.
It doesn't mean it's always 50-50, but there's always pieces that we can own.
But that was me being defensive because I've been blamed for everything for so many times.
Yeah, you spend your whole life being the one that's told it's all their fault. So of course that makes it much harder to own the pieces that you might have some responsibility for.
And actually he has owned his part in it as well, which he never has been willing to do in the past, because he scapegoated me in the past as well.
It's
a role
a
that
comfortable
I
place for anyone to fall into when it's someone else's fault all the time.
And then he just was so supportive that week, and I was really in bits one day, and he went, "Do you want me to come down?" And I said, I'd really like that. So he came down, and I can't even remember the conversation that we had, but it was basically, shall we give it another go? And
are you guys going to keep going with the couples therapy
yes.
thing? I think if I would talk to the therapist, but my recommendation would be, if at all possible, for at least another 6-12 months, because if it ends up being you guys are back together for good, which would also be wonderful, it really needs to be not just things got really bad, you left, they got a bit bad, just good enough to stay, and then
we go back into the old ways.
When we don't actively work at relationships, they go back to the status quo.
Yeah.
And you haven't been in a new dynamic long enough for that to be stabilized.
No.
So if you don't actively work at it, I almost guarantee you that within 6 to 12 months, it will be back where it was before. You have to work at it long enough to really ground and establish the change.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing, which for me is music to my ears, is it doesn't sound like it's just you that's changing.
No.
Because if you have a relationship where just one person changes, that can be enough that the other person sort of just about meets them for a while. But the motivation and the drive to change has to come from both sides.
Yeah.
And you're describing things that certainly suggest that the change is happening in him as well. And that's what's going to give you the best possible chance.
And the biggest change is, that whole it all boils down to this me feeling like I'm scapegoated and it's all I'm the problem, and if I change then life would be hunky dory. But that's not how he is now.
If that was the case, it would be much easier.
I know.
Because you'd have to change, everything gets fixed.
Yeah, but the biggest change is that he's not as grumpy and negative and as he's still got a lot of work to do on his weight and his motivation and his ability to kind of physically do things, which is important to me in our relationship. And that does affect every aspect of our relationship. But he is working on that, probably not as to the speed that I wish he was, or not to the, I'm very judgmental on things like that, because I have high expectations, not just for myself, but for everybody else.
But you are, relationships get balanced by different energies.
Yeah.
You are the sort of powerhouse push.
Yeah.
He is the calmer, more kind of accepting, it sounds like.
Yeah.
You need both of those. So it's not that push is right and the other is wrong. They're both right, and they're both sometimes can be a limitation.
So for me, what I would like to work on, and what I recognise I need to, is that tolerance piece, and like tolerating when, if I ask him to send an email to somebody, he doesn't do it like that, or I'm impatient because he doesn't work, and he recognises that. He's been so supportive of me in this new job. He's been bringing me cups of tea and making me meals and cooking and saying, I'm so proud of you. And, and it is. But he's always been, I have to say, he's always been like that. But I've always taken that as a, I suppose a lot of men, for me, I've always thought he's, this is to my shame, but I've always thought, I'm so confused actually, because I was brought up by my dad to believe that I'm capable of anything, not because I'm a woman or because I'm this or that, just I'm a human being and I'm as capable as the next person of doing anything. And I'm really grateful to my dad for bringing me up like that. But on the other hand, I've always had this real craving to be nurtured and looked after, which I never really was by in that kind of traditional way by my dad. He was always pushed me. And so then I sit here and say, I want a man who earns the money and provides, but I'd hate that actually. So that's what I think I want.
Well, I think also what you're speaking to is the difference between what you think you want and what you actually in your heart need.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, of course, that there's things that have needed work and are being worked on, but it sounds like you did a pretty good job with Simon of choosing what you needed over what you thought you wanted. The danger is, though, when you think what you think you want is more important, you don't recognize what you are being given and what you are receiving and the value that's there in the relationship. It's very easy to focus on when we're not getting that we think is important, and not seeing what we are getting, which actually is important. I mean, Katie, there is so much that's good in your life right now.
Yeah.
From the new job to things evolving with Simon. Of course, it's not perfect. And if anything, I would say right now, it's all the more important that you keep using your tools, because otherwise what happens is life happens and then you get knocked off, and then before you know it, you're slipping down in the wrong direction again. So your mindfulness meditation, your stop process, your self-love, you're being there for yourself, and the work that you've been doing and the foundation that you've been building, this is where it gets exciting, because you've got some momentum and you've got some things moving in positive directions that can also support you and can also hold you through the next chapters of your life, which I think is really exciting. So what do you need from you over these coming few weeks? How are you going to show up for yourself?
I have a really strong feeling that I need to build the trust in myself that I can do this. That I really do feel that, because I've had periods of my life where things have been, things seem to be slotting into place, and then I kind of fuck it all up. So I need to build on the trust in myself and the knowledge that I'm kind of building that I can do this. And because I think there's always a feeling at the back of my mind that it's all going to go to shit anytime soon, which has happened a lot in the past.
And it's also the natural waves and ebbs and flow of life. That things go for us, things feel like they're going against us sometimes. But this is where it's very easy to stop doing the things that helped you get to this point, because often our motivation to do those things is we feel so shit that we do them to not feel shit.
Yeah.
Now you're feeling a little bit better. It's all the more reason to keep in place those foundations, and if anything, to double down on those things.
Yeah, and I am making time, which I haven't done in the past, for me, and to do those things, and to have time where I lie down on my bed and just do a meditation for 10 minutes if I feel things are kind of.
The way it goes is, if you don't have time to meditate for 50 minutes a day, meditate for 30.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Katie, I'm really pleased. It's really nice to see you in person, but I'm also so pleased to hear how things are going, because you've worked for this.
Yeah,
this hasn't just landed on your plate. You've worked for this, so well done.
I feel quite emotional saying that, but I have put a lot of work in, yeah. And I think that is the overriding feeling for me, that I just feel like it's almost a fluke. This is it's a fluke that I'm feeling like this, and then next week it'll be shit.
Right off. You've earned this. You've worked for it.
Yeah, I have worked really hard, so there's been a lot of pain along the way. But yeah, and that kind of that even now I've got it. It's like that something really bad's going to happen soon, because you don't deserve this. You know, you don't deserve this. That's kind of what my head's saying.
I think it's really good to see that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's not. Of course, life's going to have its bumps in it and its ups and downs, but you deserve to be happy. And the fact that you're having good things happen, you deserve that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's really amazing how everything's kind of panned out. Good. Just even finding this, you know, finding you, and the work that I've been doing with Simon, with the other guys,
but also having the courage to step forward as well. It would have been very easy to say, "Oh no, I'm not doing that," but you know, you'd had the courage to take the step.
Yeah, well, I knew I had to do something.
Yeah, and we're not done.
No.
I hope you found this week's episode helpful. It's so great to see how well things are going for Katie. One of the things that I think is so exciting about this series is we get to follow people over a sustained period, and inevitably therapeutic work and of course people's life stories have their good periods, but they also have their challenging periods. And that brings me to my top tip for this week's episode. My top tip on how to keep things on track when they're going well, and how to avoid falling into old patterns. Here's the thing, this may not sound like a particularly positive message, but the truth is, when things are going well, there's a big danger. It's often the point of our greatest vulnerability, because we stop doing the things which have got us to the good place. Often our motivation for using the tools and techniques we might have learned is that we're suffering, we're in pain, we don't want to be in pain, so we do what we can to get out of pain. But when things are going well, if that's our primary motivation, the danger is we stop doing those things, the very things that have got us to that good place. So my top tip is you need to be looking for that. You need to have the awareness to recognize that we don't just need the tools when we're in a bad place. In fact, the more we use the tools in a good place, the more likely that good period is to last. Potentially, the better that good period gets, but also we're getting more skillful. We're getting more practice with those tools. And so if we do find ourselves in challenging circumstances, we've trained ourselves, we conditioned ourselves to use the tools that we need to get ourselves back on track. There's a kind of joke that goes around, the best time to go into therapy is when you don't need therapy. The best time to invest in yourself is when you're in a good place to put that foundation, to put that groundwork in place. Next week on In Therapy, we're going to be catching up with David. David's still going through a challenging time working with some of the feelings of aloneness and loneliness, but we're also starting to look at what are some of the blocks to being in a relationship. Here's a taste of what's coming up next week.
To me, your heart is saying, I want connection. What comes in response to that?
That I'm just not going to connect.
Because
I never do. Because I rarely do.
But of course, the danger is if we drive into your future looking in the rearview mirror, we're just going to crash and we're going to recreate more of the same.